2,000 years ago on this land, there used to be a group of people called the Dacians. And the Dacians got conquered by the Roman Empire. And through those two people mingling, you have the Romanians. Now, this happened 2,000 years ago, and we discussed about it in school. And the thing that the teacher told us was that despite the fact that the Roman Empire conquered this area and subjugated the people, it was good because we got aqueducts, we got a lot of Roman technology, we got access to Roman highways, which facilitated trade. So basically, despite the fact that, yes, people here lived under occupation for centuries, the thing that was good was the technological advancements that were brought. And this is probably what Matt Walsh is trying to say here, because with the whole Palestinian-Israel conflict happening again, there's a lot of people in the United States, activists, that are screaming for decolonialization, and colonialism is the worst evil that has happened on the face of the earth, despite the fact that, as you can see, even countries like myself have experienced it. In fact, it's very difficult to find a place on the planet Earth that hasn't at some point through its history not been colonized by someone else. So Matt Walsh is basically saying that colonization has largely been a civilizing force in the world, a force for good. Most of the world would still be living in the Stone Age without it, and you should not buy into the leftist decolonizing propaganda. So he's basically using the same arguments that my Romanian teacher used it, saying that because of colonialism or due to colonialism, technology has advanced in certain places in the world that wouldn't have it any other way. So Sargon of Akkad is actually of a different take here. He writes mucho texto, but I suppose I can give you a TLDR of it. One of the main striking points that he has is a crucial blow to the progressive ideology as a whole, which believes that technological progress can only happen if the society becomes enlightened. It's kind of the Star Trek way of viewing the world, that you need to have a culture that behaves in a certain way, adopts certain morals before they can discover warp travel. And only once they behave in that correct way, and once, they set aside their warfare, their greed, their capitalism, do they manage to come together, discover warp travel, and join the Federation. And unironically, this is like what most progressives believe, is that technological progress goes hand in hand with a good society, right? So only if you have good people in a society that put aside their greed, they put aside their envy, they put aside, they put aside their grievances by doing reparations and decolonialism and all that. Only after that has happened can we actually live in tune with nature, and we live in tune with each other, and then we start focusing on developing good shit, and we're taking to the stars and whatnot, right? This is what the progressive ideology believes. That's why it's called progressive, because you're progressing towards someplace, right? You're advancing. It's the only correct way of advancing is if you have this mindset. And this is completely false. It's obviously not true. Most of the technological progresses that humanity has done have happened due to wars. Necessity is what causes invention. World War II, for example, have brought many technologies and has industrialized places that wouldn't have been industrialized without it. For instance, Moldova doesn't have a highway, the part of Romania where I'm in. But now, due to the war in Ukraine, there are talks that maybe we should make a highway here, so that that type of thing happens. And again, it's because of a conflict, not because people join hands and sing Kumbaya. And you can see this in the Middle East as well. There was an article in the BBC talking about how a sheikh has used technology in order to microchip his wives, so that when one of them went to the airport, he got an SMS on his phone. There has been certain fashion parades that took place in Middle Eastern countries where women aren't allowed to walk without the burqa, so they use drones in order to parade the clothes. And, like, it shows that you don't really need to have, like, the left-leaning progressive morals in order to have an advanced civilization. So I think, like, this is what Sargon is trying to go to. It's like, even though you have people in the Stone Age, that doesn't necessarily mean that they are bad people. Well, like, they could actually be very wholesome. They can have strong family bonds, talk about their stories around the fire. They can have really good relationships with each other and their neighbors while lacking for the technological progress that we have today. So it is true, in a way, that you do not need technology in order to have a good and wholesome life. But this is where I start to disagree with Sargon, and I agree with Matt Walsh, that I don't think anyone who lives today would like to go back to the Stone Age, even if it was like a more wholesome life back then, right? So, like, with all the woes and with all the problems and the suffering that we have today, very few people would be willing to give it up in exchange for, going back in time and living under the conditions that our ancestors did. And you don't even have to go back in time. Like if you legitimately, let's say you hate modern culture and what it has, like you hate the fact that there's so much porn on the internet, the degeneracy, you hate the fact, I don't know, that the government controls you too much, you don't like cashless society, so you don't like any of this. No one is stopping you from joining an Amish community. Like, you can just, and you don't even have to join an Amish community. Like, there are many places in rural areas, usually secluded rural areas, especially if you go into the mountains or you travel to Europe, there's a lot of opportunities where you can join a country and find, like, a small place that's not even very expensive to purchase, and then you can live off the land. And you have, like, a small community there, they go to church. I mean, it's literally the lifestyle that's wholesome, family-oriented. You have to build strong relationships with your neighbors and your community. But you're completely separated from modernity. As much as possible. I mean, you will still have access to electricity. You may still have access to a phone and certain things. But overwhelmingly, you don't get FedEx, right? Like, you don't have access to all these temptations and negativity that comes from other. How many people want to do it, though? Like, how many people would be willing to do it? I see a lot of right-wingers that are advocating for it, especially like, oh, well, things were a lot better in the past. But what I do notice about them is that they are advocating this lifestyle for others. Like, they still want to benefit from all the excesses and all the technological marvels that we have today. It's just that other people should live this humble life that's a lot of toil, a lot of work, very little entertainment, very little hobbies. And Sargon isn't one of them, but like I have seen people that legitimately argue for this. And the main issue with this line of thinking is that it's not appealing. Like people do not want a life of toil and suffering unless they're born into it and then they're used to it. So for them it seems normal. Like if you're born in a village where you have to do farm work in order to survive and life is harsh, then you're used to that and you're not going to find it unusual because for you it's normal. But other people who have experienced life in the city, who know how it's like to, when you're hungry, you order a hamburger that arrives at your door, that you have like the internet at a click of a button. Well, for these individuals, such a life is definitely horrible. So going back between the argument of Matt Walsh, which claims that technology is a force for civilization, versus what Sargon is saying, that actually you can be civilized without having technology, I think the correct answer is somewhere in the middle. Like, most people do not want to live in a place without antibiotics, where they have to sleep with their barn animals, where they have to shiver from the cold or be worried that a plague of locusts has descended on their crops. And at the same time, too much technology may also be bad. Like, for example, if you look in China with all the facial recognition and all of your transactions being monitored, and right? So I do believe that the correct thing is somewhere in the middle. And I also think that if you're talking about colonization, for instance, it depends, right? Like Muhammad Ali was, if you study his life, he is a very interesting figure. In the past, he was very left-leaning. Like, he really didn't like the United States. He was part of the whole Nation of Islam until he actually went to Africa. And when he went to Africa, he has a famous quote that leftists really don't like. But he said, thank God that my grandfather got on that boat. Because while his grandfather indeed suffered, he actually did manage to have a really great life compared to the other people that were the descendants of the ones that remained in Africa. Right? So, like, he was never a slave. He never had to suffer what his grandfather did. But due to the place where he grew up, due to colonialism, he actually had a much better life than the people who remained in Africa. And, as controversial as this is, most people who do travel around the world and do see other places very rarely remain woke. Let me know what you guys think, though. And as usual, I will see you in the comment section. Take care.